Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Monday, August 4th, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, Hamas says it will allow aid for hostages if Israel stops airstrikes and more. Plus, how millions will lose their health insurance in the coming years, and Canadians are avoiding Kentucky bourbon for a classic cocktail amid tariffs. Hamas said yesterday it was prepared to coordinate with the Red Cross to deliver aid to hostages it holds in Gaza if Israel meets certain conditions. Hamas said any coordination with the Red Cross depends on Israel permanently opening humanitarian corridors and halting airstrikes during the distribution of aid. According to Israeli officials, 50 hostages now remain in Gaza, only 20 of whom are believed to be alive. Hamas so far has barred humanitarian organizations from having any kind of access to the hostages, and families have little knowledge of their conditions. Hamas recently released video of one Israeli hostage who is skeletally thin and shown digging a hole that he says in the video is for his own grave. Meanwhile, Gaza's health ministry says 6 more people died of starvation or malnutrition in the enclave over the past 24 hours. The recent deaths raised the toll from what international humanitarian agencies say may be a developing famine to 175, according to the ministry. Millions of Americans will lose their health insurance over the next decade under President Donald Trump's recently passed tax cut and spending bill. I spoke with USA Today consumer health reporter Ken Oltucker for a closer look. Ken, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So just starting here, Ken, how many people will lose health insurance in the coming years under the cuts we saw in this recently passed bill? What did this bill functionally do to these folks?
Well, this was the recently passed tax cut and spending bill, the budget bill that largely with Republican support passed Congress. President Trump signed it on July 4th. The most recent estimate from the Congressional Budget Office, which is the nonpartisan scorekeeper for legislation, estimated that 10 million Americans would lose insurance over the next decade under the various provisions. Now, that doesn't include another 4.2 million people who will likely lose coverage if a separate policy, which was passed under the Biden administration to make Affordable Care Act plans more affordable, it was funded by tax credits that people were given when they signed up for insurance. Those tax credits are set to expire at the end of this year. So combined, over the next decade, we're looking at over 14 million people who could potentially lose coverage.
Wow. And Ken, this is all just combined with overall rising insurance costs that we had already seen, correct?
Yes, overall, we're seeing more expensive costs in healthcare. That's trickling down to everybody, not just those who are lower income and who qualify for Medicaid. There was a recent survey from KFF, which is a health policy nonprofit, that estimated the Affordable Care Act plans would increase. And in addition, there are consultants out there expecting pretty sizable increases in health insurance that you get through the workplace, which is where most people get their coverage.
Well, Ken, you also write that health advocates say millions who might be affected by cuts likely aren't even aware of the scope that we're talking about. Some might not even be aware they're on Medicaid, for instance. Can you just walk us through why so many folks are still so confused about their healthcare? What did you hear from experts?
A lot of people who are on Medicaid may be on a plan that's not called Medicaid. Medicaid is a federal state program. The federal government largely funds it with contributions from the state, but the states administer the programs. And what a lot of states have done is they've sort of rebranded these programs. There are different reasons why they might do that. They might try to, increase enrollment, get more people to sign up without the sort of stigma that could be attached with having a government-funded, government-run healthcare program. At least for some people, that might be an issue. So many states across the nation have rebranded it, and then the name Medicaid doesn't appear at all. That's one aspect. On top of that, a lot of states also contract with private insurance companies to run their Medicaid programs to provide benefits to people. So you will see names like United Healthcare and Blue Cross Blue Shield that is actually providing your insurance when in fact it's really a Medicaid plan.
All right, folks should go check out a couple of the links we have in today's show notes pointing you to Ken's full pieces on this topic. Ken Oltucker covers consumer health for USA Today. Thank you, Ken.
All right, thank you.
Authorities have identified the 4 victims fatally shot in a rural Montana bar on Friday as Nancy Loretta Kelly, a bartender, and 3 bar patrons, Daniel Edwin Bailey, David Allen Leach, and Tony Wayne Palm. A manhunt for the suspected gunman, a former U.S. Army soldier, continues as of early this morning. At around 10:30 a.m. local time Friday, the suspect walked into a bar and opened fire in the small town of Anaconda, Montana, about 105 miles southeast of Missoula. He then fled in a white truck, according to authorities. The suspect has been identified as Michael Paul Brown. You can read more with a link in today's show notes. Canadians are exploring new ways to make the classic old-fashioned cocktail after pulling American booze from their shelves amid Trump tariff policies. I spoke with USA Today national correspondent Michael Collins about his reporting trip north of the border and what he took away. Michael, thanks for hopping on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I want to hear about this trip in a second, but first let's just go back to February when, starting then, bars and liquor stores across Canada really removed bourbon and other U.S.-made spirits and wines from their shelves. Just refresh us, Michael, on why this happened.
At the time, the president had been making a lot of noise about Canada. He had been talking about making Canada the 51st state, which, as you can imagine, didn't go over very well in Canada. He also had threatened to put tariffs on Canadian products, and he followed up on that. He actually did it. In March, he imposed a 25% tariff on most Canadian products. He later backtracked and exempted products that were covered under the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, which is a trade deal that was signed while he was in office. And then just last week, he imposed another 35% tariff on Canadian products. So that really is kind of what was the impetus for all of this.
All right, well, you set out on this trip, I'm jealous a little bit here, Michael, to Quebec, north of the border, to sample old-fashioned cocktails made with different brands of Canadian rye instead of the traditional American bourbon. Just tell us a bit about this trip and your own personal history, Michael, with old fashions, considering your roots in Kentucky.
Well, what we wanted to do with this trip was there have been a lot of stories written about the politics behind these tariffs and these insults going back and forth of Canadian statehood, but none of them had been told from the Canadian perspective. So we really wanted to find out what Canadians thought of everything that's going on. So we went there. I was there for Canada Day, which of course is the day when they celebrate the birth of their country. So I tracked down a bunch of businesses, talked to them about how they're being impacted by these tariffs. And in terms of my own personal experience with bourbon, I am a Kentucky native, born and bred. Interestingly enough, I never really cared for bourbon when I was in my younger years. It's everywhere. I mean, you can't escape it. It wasn't until I was much older that a friend gifted me with a bottle of Woodford Reserve, and he told me how to drink it. You know, whenever I'd had it before, it was frequently mixed with Coke, which I just, to this day, I do not like. That's just too sweet for me. But he told me how to drink it. You just drink it straight up, you know, no mixer, just a drop of water. And that opened up the whole world. I started trying the different bourbon-based drinks, and my favorite was hands down the old fashioned.
Just so I'm clear, like these decisions from bar owners and the bars themselves, are they more about tariffs or national pride? I mean, is this a top-down policy decision from the Canadian provinces not to permit any U.S. wines and spirits?
It's kind of both. It started out as a decision by some individual restaurants and some individual bars. I talked to a restaurant owner who made the decision to remove all American food products from his restaurant menu, to remove all American booze from his menu. I also talked to the owner of a very small bar. It's this really cool bar called Grumpy's. He made the same decision. He removed all American booze from his shelves. They did this in early February. Within weeks, the Quebec Liquor Board made the decision to stop allowing shipments of American spirits into their country. So you can no longer buy them there now. So to your point, it started out as kind of a grassroots thing, but it grew.
All right, well, I have to ask, Michael, you went to a few spots. What is your taste review of the Canadian old fashions you drank, considering your Kentucky and old fashioned roots?
This really is a matter of individual taste. So something that I like, someone else may not like it. I tried different ones. Some of them were better than others. At one bar, one of the old fashions that I tasted was made from a Canadian whiskey called J.P. Weiser's. And that one to me was a little bit sweeter than the bourbon version. Now, the reason for that may be the bartender who made it told me to compensate for the bitterness of the rye. He uses a very healthy dose of simple syrup. So he probably uses more than you would get in a regular old fashioned. And another one, they used a Canadian rye called Canadian Club. And this is a classic whiskey that's aged for 12 years. And so that one had, kind of hints of vanilla and honey and even sort of a butterscotchy aftertaste.
Michael Collins is a national correspondent with USA Today. I love this piece, Michael. Thanks for hopping on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your pods. And if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. As always, you can email us as well at podcasts@usatoday.com. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.